Hi, I'm Ben Ferguson, and welcome to your AMAC Weekly News. First up, liberals have proven how little they care about the American people. Rather than pass the original bipartisan coronavirus relief bill, they blocked it and put forth a bill that was full of things completely unrelated to the virus. Find out more about what happened in a moment. Up next, the media appears to be continuing their campaign to destroy the president at every turn. In fact, no matter what Donald Trump has done to protect the American people, they seem to find something to complain about. More on that in just a moment. And finally, we have our own AMAC representative to update you on the impacts of the COVID-19 and our members. All of that and more in just a moment. But first, quick reminder, make sure you share this video with your family and friends right now on social media. Your AMAC Weekly News starts right now. Many Democrats in Washington have shown their true colors more than ever before. After about 2 days of genuinely bipartisan negotiations on stage 3 of the coronavirus assistance program, it was going to go through the Senate without any difficulty. Well, in a last-minute ditch effort to stop it, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer decided that the bill wasn't good enough, and they convinced their other liberal colleagues to vote against this purely bipartisan bill. Why? To hurt the American people and Donald Trump. Now, just when you think it's gotten bad enough, they went above and beyond to hurt every American. They were even given a second chance on Monday to do the right thing and vote this bill through. They voted against it yet again. Now, leading conservative voices were heard loud and clear on the Senate floor as they battled it out to get this assistance passed that would help every American. Senator Ted Cruz hit the Senate floor and stated that liberals were making an enormous mistake that will impact countless Americans. Take a look at what he had to say that aired on C-SPAN.
A number of people have cited the famed quote from Rahm Emanuel, who's President Obama's chief of staff, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." Sadly, we're seeing the embodiment of that cynical approach right now. Because all the people out of jobs the Democrats are using to push, what are they pushing for? Changing the emission standards on airplanes. Mr. President, what the hell do the emission standards on airplanes have to do with thousands of people dying and millions of people out of work in the coronavirus epidemic? Don't treat this bill like a partisan Christmas list. And by the way, Republicans, we've got things we would like to advance too. Things I believe in deeply. You want to talk about what I'd like to do? I'd like to abolish the IRS. I've campaigned on that all over the country. I'm going to continue fighting for that. But, Mr. President, I'm not standing here with an amendment saying, as part of this emergency relief, let's abolish the IRS. There's a place for that political and policy discussion. The Democrats are pushing wind and solar tax credits. Mr. President, what in the hell does a windmill have to do with this crisis?
Now, what Ted Cruz had to say there is absolutely correct. Now, Nancy Pelosi had other ideas, and she decided that it was important to hurt you, the American people, small businesses, and the president more than ever before, instead of actually helping American families. So what did she put in the bill to make sure that it didn't pass? Here are just some of her things that have nothing to do with the coronavirus. For example, raise statistics for all corporate boards at companies receiving assistance. Again, that has nothing to do with coronavirus. Bailing out all current debt of the Postal Service. Again, has nothing to do with COVID-19. Require early voting. That has nothing to do with COVID-19. Same-day voter registration she added in there. Plus, a $10,000 bailout for student loans that has nothing to do with fighting coronavirus. Also, for companies accepting assistance, 1/3 of board members must be chosen by workers. Also, a full offset of airline admissions by 2025. They also added in the bill greenhouse gas statistics for every individual flight and retirement plans for community newspaper employees. And that $15 minimum wage they've been wanting, they threw that in the coronavirus bill, mandating that companies that receive assistance must then increase their minimum wage to $15 an hour. Also, permanent paid leave at companies receiving assistance, that was stuck in the bill. Now, that's just the beginning, and I've got one question for everyone. What does any of that have to do with fighting the coronavirus? Well, do you want to know what Nancy Pelosi had to say about all of these provisions that she put in this bill on purpose to try to hurt the American people and, most importantly, hurt Donald Trump? Well, according to her, she's now claiming that all of these things directly related in some way to COVID-19. Take a look at this from her interview on CNN.
Everything we're suggesting just relates to COVID-19. It's not about making law for the future. It's about COVID, well, except fighting COVID-19 is for the future, but I mean, it's not changing policy except as it applies here. So again, many of the provisions in there have been greatly improved because of negotiation.
Now, to put it all in perspective for you, I want you to think about this. Nancy Pelosi and her colleagues had a week off on the House side. They come back to Washington after taking that break while other Americans are fighting for their lives and getting laid off from their jobs, and they decide to block a bill not once but twice that would actually help every American who was hurting. Now, you know what happens when things like this bill don't get passed quickly? Well, the media then turns and blames the president somehow for not getting anything done to help the American people. Donald Trump was doing his job while Democrats were on vacation. Now, yes, a deal did finally occur shortly after midnight on Wednesday, but that happened days after the original bill was supposed to have already been passed and would have helped quickly assist every American citizen. The end of the day, Democrats knew that Americans were getting infected, that Americans are dying, that Americans are losing their jobs, and many more are losing their businesses. And still, they were more concerned with stopping a bill to try to hurt President Trump by using this crisis for political gain than helping so many Americans who are actually suffering. Now, look, we've got to stand up for our president, and we got to make sure that our voices are heard in Washington. And that is exactly what AMAC has been doing all week long. So the mainstream media is getting more and more desperate when it comes to figuring out a way to try to take down Donald Trump, even using the coronavirus crisis as a reason to do it. Their latest attempt involved a man who decided to not take a medication, but use a fish tank solution for cleaning. He claimed to protect himself from the coronavirus. This man also had no symptoms of the virus. That's right. So now some in the media are actually trying to blame Donald Trump for the death of a man who did something that was insane. Now, what the man used to, quote, self-medicate was chloroquine. It's a phosphate, which is an additive commonly used with aquariums to clean fish tanks. Now, this attempt killed the man and landed his wife also in the hospital. Now, the left began by reporting it as though the anti-malaria drug had been used. It was not. This man used a solution to clean a fish tank. Take a look at this report about the incident from CNN.
A game changer. That is how President Trump describes the anti-malarial drug chloroquine. It's now one of 69 drugs being investigated as potential treatment against coronavirus. The problem, it has not yet been approved. And in Arizona, one man has died after an apparent attempt to self-medicate with that drug.
Now, to be very clear, there is a huge difference between chloroquine phosphate and hydroxychloroquine. But the left has decided to blame Donald Trump for the mistake that this couple made that wasn't being prescribed to them by a doctor. They used something you put in a fish tank. And now the liberal media is trying to blame the president because this couple decided to ingest this cleaner that they used to clean their koi fish tank. MSNBC did a great job of attacking the president in an interview on MSNBC. They actually had the opportunity to speak with a newly widowed woman and watch them blame President Trump for her husband's death, and they didn't even stop to say, did a doctor give you this information? No. Was it a prescription? No. They just ran with it.
You know, I followed up asking if she had heard during that same press conference you just heard from President Trump in this last Thursday, when he talked about the success of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine and fighting other health issues like arthritis and malaria. And I said, though, did you hear the follow-up that the FDA had not approved it for fighting coronavirus? And she said, quote, yeah, but you know, they kept saying that it was approved for other things. And you know, Trump kept saying it was basically pretty much a cure. I will remind folks that people are watching these live press conferences on a daily basis that the president is delivering. And you saw perhaps at its height there on that last Thursday when President Trump suggested that the FDA had approved these two particular types of drug to be taken. He even went on to say, quote, could be an absolute total game changer. He said, we've had some very good tests and it's been successful. Right after that, Dr. Fauci went and took that microphone at that press conference and said that these were anecdotal, quote, anecdotal reports. We should note today in New York, there will begin clinical testing on some of these drugs to see if they potentially have a positive impact on treating coronavirus.
I wish I could say that that's all the media has done. However, they have also tried to call the president a racist for acting early on coronavirus and now for calling it the China virus. Now, what makes this so incredibly hypocritical is that the media also called the virus the China virus when all of this first started. You don't believe me? Watch this montage of how the media used their own word that they're now claiming is racist in their own reporting.
The Chinese coronavirus.
This is coming as the Chinese coronavirus.
China's coronavirus outbreak.
China's coronavirus. Outbreak anxiety. The death toll nearly doubles in China's coronavirus outbreak.
China's coronavirus.
Just how bad is China's coronavirus crisis?
China's coronavirus outbreak.
China's coronavirus outbreak.
China's coronavirus outbreak.
China's coronavirus.
China's coronavirus. China's coronavirus.
China's coronavirus.
Concerns about the China coronavirus.
Now, you can see the media obviously changing the narrative. And if they claim the president is a racist for using these words, then aren't they all racist because they're the first ones to use them? Yet, this is the socialist left. And many in the media have done everything they can to try to take out this president, blaming him for things like two grown adults drinking fish tank cleaner. Now, these useful idiots would rather side with and protect China than side with our own American president. Now, this is anti-Americanism and would make our founders turn over in their graves. Yes, it is a time to come together as a country, and it's our job to remind everyone that we should be putting our country first and politics second. We should be putting our politics completely aside and work together on fighting the coronavirus. But the reality is many in the media and the Democrats on Capitol Hill are doing whatever they can to attack the president, to try to win on the political battlefield instead of fight to protect the American people. And all of this is shameful. Lastly today on your AMAC Weekly News, I wanted to give you an update on what AMAC is doing to protect your hard-earned tax dollars from being abused on some of the pork barrel spending that many Democrats have tried to put in the coronavirus funding. Take a listen. Joining me now is AMAC spokesperson, also a man who used to work in the Reagan and Bush White House and worked with Colin Powell, Bobby Charles. Bobby, I want to ask you directly. You spent a lot of time in these two White Houses. You spent time on Capitol Hill as well. It is shocking to see how long the Democrats were willing to play politics before they finally got this coronavirus stimulus bill to help the American people out there. I've never seen anything like this. Have you?
No, and to give perspective, although we live in extraordinary times, this is probably the most reckless act politically I've seen in my lifetime. You have an entire nation that is waiting with their economy down for aid, and you have Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in the House who have flown back to stop the agreement from occurring. There was a full agreement apparently by both McConnell, Schumer, and the White House. So what they did is they lardered this bill up. They wanted to larder it up with a federal control of the entire medical supply chain. They wanted to put more money into public broadcasting, climate change, emissions for airlines, wind and solar turbines. They wanted to have a $15 minimum wage. They wanted to radically uptick all of the collective bargaining power, create statistical reporting across the board, just all kinds of things that were completely out of the box.
I think one of the most shocking things about this bill is we see that the majority of coronavirus cases are actually coming out of New York City compared to the whole entire country. L.A. and California having major issues. You got two leaders in Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer from California and New York, where the epicenter of this outbreak is taking place for the country. And they're sitting there saying, hey, let's see if we can get a funding for abortions in this bill. Let's see if we can get $15 an hour in this bill. Nancy Pelosi was talking about Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, which had nothing to do with coronavirus funding. Do you think that we will see at least some of their constituents say, this is just absurd what you guys tried to do here to stall this thing? Will there be any political repercussions for them?
Well, let me speak to that as National AMAC spokesperson. Look, we represent conservative Americans over the age of 50. We have more than 2 million members. Those members are in the vulnerable population, and there are a lot of them in California, New York, and around the country. What they want is action. They don't want talk. They don't want a socialist power grab. They want action. And I do believe eventually Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats will be, in this moment in time, will be shamed into doing the right thing. The president, incidentally, is simultaneously, under the National Defense Production Act, he is already working closely across 70 agencies with the private sector. They have produced and have begun already sending more than 14 million masks, more than, I think, 1.9 million surgical gowns. They have tens of millions of gloves going out. The GM, GE, and I'm trying to remember the third one, GM, GE, and I think maybe 3M have gotten together with the president to retool their factories for ventilators and respirators. The president is doing what he has said he would do, which is to put the country on a war footing rapidly and hopefully for a short period of time in order to execute on what the Americans need. And Nancy Pelosi needs to understand, with all of her sort of left-leaning Democrats that have redefined themselves as socialists, they need to sit down and recognize that the American people want them to act like adults. They want this done. They don't want more playing of games. And this is really an old world problem. She thinks she can larder the club.
There's no doubt that this is a clear abuse of power by what people should be putting down their political flags and coming together for all Americans. This is a global pandemic. We're going to see the numbers continue to rise in this country for probably a couple weeks at the bare minimum. And you have a lot of Americans that are out of work, small businesses that need this money desperately. We're going to see a massive amount of bankruptcies. Bobby Charles, AMAC spokesperson, I really appreciate you coming on today, talking to so many members that are very concerned about the spread of COVID-19 and the government's response to it. And we're going to hold these members of Congress accountable in Washington on their behalf. And that's the most important thing. Thanks for coming on today.
You bet.
That's it for this edition of your AMAC Weekly News. Please make sure you share this with your family and friends on your timeline. And also, if you haven't joined AMAC or renewed your AMAC membership, please do it right now so you can continue to receive this show and access to our incredible member benefits. You also get our AMAC magazine. And most importantly, AMAC is fighting hard on Capitol Hill, representing now more than 2 million conservatives every day. So make sure you join or renew today. I'm Ben Ferguson. I'll see you back next week for our next episode.